It is 40,000 years ago in what we now call the Dordogne region of southern France. The sun is dipping low, casting long, bruised purple shadows across a landscape of limestone cliffs and dense thickets of pine. It is late autumn, and the air carries that sharp metallic scent of coming snow. You are part of a small band of humans huddling near the mouth of a shallow cave. You are tired, and more importantly, you are incredibly hungry. The reindeer herds you've been tracking have moved south faster than expected, leaving your group with empty stomachs and a very urgent problem. Just a few hundred yards away, down by a freezing stream, a cave lion is finishing off a kill. It is a massive creature, nearly 30% larger than a modern African lion, with thick fur and shoulders like granite boulders. You have spears. You have fire. You have 20 people who are all capable of a coordinated strike. The lion is right there, and it is made of hundreds of pounds of calorie-dense muscle. Yet, you and your kin don't even discuss it as an option. You watch the lion, you respect the lion, and you wait for it to leave so you can maybe scavenge the scraps of the deer it didn't finish. You aren't being cowards. You are being brilliant mathematicians, even if you don't have a word for calculus yet. Now, let's jump forward 40,000 years. Imagine you are walking down the aisle of your local grocery store. You see rows of chicken breasts, stacks of pork chops, and marbled slabs of beef. You might see some exotic options like bison, or if you're at a very fancy butcher, maybe some venison or elk. But you will never in a million years see a package of Siberian tiger thighs or wolf ribs sitting next to the bacon. It feels normal to us because that's just how the world works. But if you really stop and think about it, it's actually quite strange. We are the apex predators of this planet. We have conquered every environment, split the atom, and gone to the moon. Throughout history, whenever humans have found something that wasn't poisonous and had calories, we've generally tried to put it on a plate. We eat fermented shark. We eat insects. We eat fungus that grows on rotting logs. But across almost every single culture in human history, there has been a massive, invisible do not eat sign hanging over the heads of other predators. We don't eat the things that eat us. It isn't just a matter of taste, and it isn't just because lions are hard to catch. There is a deep biological and mathematical logic behind this choice that has shaped our species for millions of years. But wait, you might think this is just a matter of fairness or some kind of ancient hunter's code where we respect our fellow killers. That's a nice poetic thought, but nature doesn't care about poetry. It cares about the brutal reality of the energy bill. To understand why your ancestors never had a coyote cookout, we have to look at a concept called trophic dynamics. This was first really mapped out in 1942 by a brilliant young ecologist named Raymond Lindemann. He realized that nature operates on a very strict, very punishing tax system. Think of the sun as the ultimate source of all wealth on Earth. Plants are the only ones who can earn that wealth directly by turning sunlight into energy through photosynthesis. When a cow comes along and eats that grass, it doesn't get 100% of the energy the grass collected. Most of that energy was already used by the grass just to exist, to grow roots, and to stay alive. The cow only gets about 10% of that energy to turn into its own body mass. This is where the math starts to get really ugly for anyone wanting to eat a predator. If a lion eats that cow, the lion only gets 10% of the energy that was in the cow. By the time you get to the lion, you are looking at a 10% of 10% situation. This means that for every pound of lion meat you see standing in front of you, it took 10 pounds of herbivores to create it, and those 10 pounds of herbivores required 100 pounds of plants. From a survival standpoint, eating a lion is like trying to run a business where you spend $10 to make $1 in profit. It is a catastrophic waste of resources. Your ancestors didn't need a PhD in ecology to realize that it was much more efficient to just eat the deer directly. By eating the deer, they were getting 10 times more of the sun's original energy than if they waited for a lion to eat the deer and then tried to eat the lion. In the game of prehistoric survival, being a middleman was a death sentence. That energy math sounds like a solid reason to skip the lion steaks, but maybe you're thinking, I don't care about the global energy budget, I'm just hungry right now. And that wolf is looking pretty tasty. Even if you ignore the efficiency of the food chain, your body would likely give you a very violent reminder of why this is a bad idea. This brings us to a terrifying phenomenon called bioaccumulation. Because predators sit at the very top of the food chain, they act like a biological trash can for everything that went wrong in the levels below them. If a blade of grass absorbs a tiny, tiny amount of a heavy metal or a toxin, and a rabbit eats 1,000 blades of grass, all that toxin stays in the rabbit. If a fox eats 10 of those rabbits, it now has all the toxins from 10,000 blades of grass sitting in its tissues. By the time you get to an apex predator like a bear or a big cat, they have spent their entire lives concentrating every poison in their environment into their own muscles and organs. The most famous and lethal example of this is the polar bear's liver. For centuries, Arctic explorers found out the hard way that eating a polar bear could be a final mistake. In the 19th century, members of various expeditions, including the survivors of the shipwrecked Carnivores, reported horrific symptoms after consuming bear liver. We're talking about skin peeling off in sheets, agonizing bone pain, hair loss, and eventually liver failure and death. The culprit wasn't a ghost or a curse, it was hypervitaminosis A. Because polar bears eat seals, and seals eat fish, the bears accumulate massive toxic amounts of vitamin A in their livers. A single gram of polar bear liver contains enough vitamin A to make a human severely ill, and a few ounces can be fatal. While most land predators aren't quite that poisonous, in a single sitting, the principle remains. Carnivore meat is often loaded with heavy metals like mercury and lead, along with a nasty cocktail of organic pollutants. Your ancestors might not have known the word bioaccumulation, but they certainly noticed that the people who made a habit of eating scavengers and predators tended to get sick and die young. Of course, you might argue that humans are the toughest creatures on the planet, and we've survived plenty of bad food. After all, we've made it through ice ages and plagues. But there is a massive difference between being tough and being suicidal, and that leads us to the hidden world of parasites. Every animal has parasites, but predators are a special case. There is a particularly nasty roundworm called Trichinella spiralis *. It causes a disease called trichinosis, which involves larvae burrowing into your muscles and encysting there, causing fever, intense pain, and sometimes death. Most people today associate trichinosis with undercooked pork, but pigs are omnivores. In the wild, the absolute kings of trichinosis are carnivores. Because they eat other animals that might be infected, they collect the parasites and keep them alive in their own muscle tissue. If you were an ancient human trying to cook a bear over a flickering campfire, you had no way of knowing if the center of that thick leg muscle reached the temperature needed to kill those larvae. If you got it wrong, you weren't just getting a stomachache, you were inviting a colony of worms to take up permanent residence in your bicep and your heart. When archaeologists look at ancient human remains, they often find evidence of high parasite loads, but the groups that focused on herbivores, animals that generally have much lower levels of these specific meat-to-meat parasites, had a much better chance of staying healthy enough to raise the next generation. The choice to not eat predators wasn't a choice at all. It was a filter. The people who thought a panther burger was a good idea simply didn't live long enough to pass that recipe down to their children. You might still think that a free meal is a free meal, and if a predator died of natural causes, surely we would have eaten it. That makes perfect sense on paper, but it ignores the face removal factor, also known as the risk-reward ratio. In the 1970s, an ecologist named Eric Charnov developed something called optimal foraging theory. It's basically a way of calculating how an animal should behave to get the most food for the least amount of work and the lowest amount of risk. To a human hunter, a deer is a high-value target. It's big, it's full of fat and protein, and its primary defense is to run away. If you mess up a deer hunt, you're just hungry. But a leopard's primary defense is to turn you into a collection of red ribbons. Even if you win the fight, a single bite from a predator can lead to a lethal infection in a world without antibiotics. A scratched cornea or a mangled hand could mean you can no longer hunt or gather, making you a burden on your tribe. When you look at it through the lens of optimal foraging theory, predators are the worst possible prey choice. They are rare, they are dangerous, and they are low in fat. Most apex predators are incredibly lean because they have to be fast and agile to catch their own food. In a survival situation, lean protein is actually quite dangerous. There is a condition called rabbit starvation or protein poisoning, where if you eat only lean meat without any fat or carbohydrates, your liver can't process the nitrogen fast enough, and you can actually starve to death while your stomach is full. Big cats and wolves are essentially running machines made of lean fiber. Compared to a fatty, slow-moving mammoth or a plump antelope, a wolf is a lot of work for a very thin reward. Your ancestors weren't just avoiding getting bitten, they were avoiding a bad investment. You might argue that ancient humans were the ultimate badasses who feared nothing and would have hunted predators just for the clout or the thrill. That makes for a great Hollywood movie, but the fossil record tells a much more humbling story. For the vast majority of our history, we weren't the ones doing the hunting. We were the ones being hunted. There was a genus of prehistoric cats called Dinophelus*, often referred to as false saber-toothed cats. They were specifically adapted to hunt primates. Archaeologists have found hominid skulls from millions of years ago with two perfect puncture marks in the top of the head, marks that match the canine teeth of Dinophelus* perfectly. We weren't looking at big cats as a potential dinner. We were looking at them as the literal monster under the bed that could snatch us in the middle of the night. This created a deep-seated evolutionary wiring in our brains. We have a specialized circuit in our amygdala that reacts to the shape and movement of large predators before our conscious brain even knows what we're looking at. This is why your heart rate spikes when you see a snake that turns out to be a garden hose. We spent millions of years as the prey in that relationship. You don't generally try to eat the thing that you spent 5 million years running away from. That psychological barrier is so thick and so old that it's practically part of our DNA. By the time we developed the tools and the social organization to actually take down a lion, the idea of eating one felt fundamentally wrong on a primal level. We had spent too long being on the other side of that dinner invitation. Surely, though, once we got spears and fire and started living in larger groups, we would have wanted some kind of revenge. We should have been grilling our former bullies as a way of showing the world who was boss now. Yet we did something much weirder and much more effective. We invited them to dinner, but not as the main course. This is the fascinating theory put forward by Pat Shipman in her book The Invaders*. She argues that the real reason we didn't eat predators like wolves is because we realized they were worth infinitely more to us alive than dead. A dead wolf gives you one mediocre, possibly parasitic meal and a pelt. A living wolf, once domesticated into a dog, gives you a lifetime of hunting assistance, protection, and a sensory system that can see and smell threats long before you can. This was a massive strategic pivot. Instead of trying to harvest the meager calories stored in a predator's body, we harnessed the predator's operating system. We used their tracking skills to find the high-calorie herbivores that we actually wanted to eat. It was the ultimate life hack. Once that relationship started, the taboo against eating dogs or wolves became even stronger. You don't eat your business partner, and you certainly don't eat the security guard who keeps the real monsters away from your children at night. This coevolution changed the course of human history. It allowed us to outcompete other hominids, like the Neanderthals, who didn't seem to have the same wolf connection. By not eating the predator, we essentially hired them to help us conquer the world. It sounds like we had it all figured out. A perfect logical system of avoidance based on energy math, toxicity, and strategic partnership. Except, humans are notoriously messy, and sometimes we broke every single one of these rules. If you look closely enough at the archaeological record, you will find exceptions that prove the rule. For example, at certain Paleolithic sites in Europe, researchers have found bare bones with very clear butchery marks that show someone was carefully removing the meat, not just taking the fur. But here is the catch. These marks almost always appear during periods of extreme environmental stress, like the height of a glacial period. When the reindeer herds vanished and the plants were buried under 6 feet of snow, the energy math changed. When the choice is eat the questionable bear or watch your children starve to death, the bear starts looking a lot better. These were emergency calories, the prehistoric equivalent of eating the leather from your boots. But there was another reason ancient humans occasionally ate predators, and it's arguably the most human reason of all: ritual. As the great anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss pointed out, humans don't just eat to fill our stomachs, we eat to satisfy our minds. In many indigenous cultures, consuming a small piece of a predator wasn't about nutrition, it was about transubstantiation. It was a way to physically ingest the spirit or the power of the animal. If you killed a lion that had been terrorizing your village, eating a piece of its heart was a symbolic act of closure and a way to claim its strength. This wasn't eating dinner. It was a sacred ceremony. This is why, even when we did eat predators, it was almost always in a highly controlled, ritualized context. It was the exception that confirmed the daily reality. Predators are not food. They are symbols. They are enemies. They are partners, but they are not on the menu. Think about how this has trickled down into our modern world. We are living in the most pampered, food-secure era in human history. We can eat whatever we want, whenever we want. Yet, the predator taboo is still incredibly strong. Even adventurous eaters who will try fried tarantulas or fermented tofu often draw the line at dog meat or cat meat. In the West, the idea is so repulsive that we have laws against it. We tell ourselves it's because these are pets. But that's a modern explanation for an ancient instinct. We don't eat them because for 2 million years our ancestors' survival depended on not eating them. We are the descendants of the people who looked at the cave lion and said, "No thanks, I'll wait for the deer." This deep-time logic has shaped our very sense of what meat is supposed to taste like. The reason carnivore meat tastes gamey or off to us is partly due to compounds like scatol and indole, which are byproducts of the high-protein, meat-based diet of the predator. But it's also because our taste buds have evolved to prefer the fat and flavor profiles of herbivores. We have spent so many generations eating grass-fed animals that our brains have labeled that specific flavor profile as safe and nutritious. When we taste a predator, our brain's warning system starts ringing. It tastes wrong because, biologically speaking, it is asterisk wrong. It's an evolutionary keep-out sign that is still functioning in your mouth today. This brings us to a much bigger realization about who we are as a species. We often think of ourselves as the masters of nature, the top of the food chain that can do whatever it wants. But the story of why we don't eat predators shows that we are actually very much in the system, not above it. We are bound by the same laws of thermodynamics and biology as every other creature. Our culture, our taboos, and even our modern grocery stores are just the final polished versions of a survival strategy that was hammered out in the cold and the dark of the Stone Age. We didn't decide to be this way, the world decided for us. The environment set the rules, and we were the ones who were smart enough to follow them. Next time you're at a zoo or watching a nature documentary and you see a tiger or a wolf, take a second to notice that feeling in your chest. It's a mix of awe, fear, and a very specific kind of distance. You don't look at a tiger and think lunch, the way you might look at a cow in a field and think steak. That gap in your thinking is a gift from your ancestors. It is the result of millions of years of hard-won knowledge, of watching people get sick from bare liver, of watching friends get mauled by leopards, and of watching the energy math fail time and time again. That lion at the edge of the clearing wasn't just a threat, it was a lesson. It was a living embodiment of a boundary that humans were not meant to cross. And so we stayed on our side of the line. We ate the grass eaters, we befriended the wolves, and we let the lions be the kings of their own domain. This choice, this refusal to eat the other killers, might be one of the most important decisions our species ever made. It allowed us to grow our brains, to build our civilizations, and to eventually reach a point where we could sit in a comfortable room and wonder why we do the things we do. We are the survivors of a 2 million-year-long game of don't eat the boss. You might still think you're a rebel, that you're the kind of person who could survive anything and eat anything. But the reality is that your very existence is proof that your ancestors were the ultimate conformists to the laws of biology. They didn't eat the lion because they wanted you to be here to talk about it. They knew that in the long run, it is better to be a smart coward than a brave meal. The world is full of things that want to eat you, and a few things that you can eat, and the secret to our success was simply knowing which was which. So, as you go about your day, perhaps heading to the kitchen for a snack or planning your next dinner, remember that your plate is a map of human history. The beef, the chicken, the pork, these are the rewards of a strategy that worked. The absence of the lion and the wolf is the mark of a species that learned to respect the math of the universe. You are at the top of the food chain not because you eat everything, but because you were smart enough to know exactly what to leave alone. And honestly, given the choice between a parasite-riddled wolf burger and a nice, safe slice of pizza, I think we can all agree that your ancestors made the right call. You can pretend you're the ultimate apex hunter all you want, but the fact that you've never had a cougar corn dog proves that deep down, you're still that same cautious human huddling in the cave, and you know exactly who's really in charge of the menu.